Between the increase in data hacks and corporations' mismanagement of personal information, Americans are growing increasingly less trustful that their personal information is safe online. Now, a California law is giving users power back over their data. The California Consumer Privacy Act allows people to find out what a company knows about them, get information deleted, and stop businesses from selling it. Corporations are spending as much as $100 million to get ready for the law's enactment in January, since businesses are expected to extend these protections to consumers in other states as well.
Here to talk about all this is Gigi Sohn. She previously served as counselor to the former chairman of the FCC and is a Benton's Senior Fellow and Public Advocate. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks, Gigi.
Great to be here.
Gigi, tell us a little bit about this California privacy law. I mean, is it something that makes sense in your view?
Absolutely. Look, the federal government has not passed a comprehensive consumer privacy law. Every day we're treated to stories of data breaches and violations of people's privacy. And when the federal government stands down, the states have to step up. And this is what California has done here. And let me say, this may be the strongest and most comprehensive consumer privacy law in the country. But every state has privacy laws of all kinds. So I went and testified up in Maine, in Augusta, Maine, on a privacy bill. And they have privacy laws that protect prescriptions, protect data about domestic violence victims, protect library records. So every state has privacy laws, but there isn't a comprehensive consumer privacy law that particularly deals with online privacy, and that obviously is a huge thing right now.
Yeah. What do you make of the concerns that this will exacerbate identity theft? Like, where's that coming from?
I have no idea. I haven't heard that argument. I think it's ridiculous. Look, the California law, while perhaps the most comprehensive and best in the nation, is still actually not that strong. For example, consumers can only opt out of the sale of their data. They can't opt out, or better yet, opt in to the collection of their data. There is no private right of action, meaning consumers don't have the right to sue a company if they get harmed because of data collection and data sale. And this is not a small thing, right? When your privacy is violated, it could lead to economic harm, it could lead to social harm, it could even lead to physical harm.
So what, Gigi, would you respond to? I mean, I've heard criticism of this, saying it's a lot like Europe, that Europe has laws very much like this, but Europe also doesn't have its own Silicon Valley, and it hasn't created, you know, this robust enterprising system. So how do we know that this won't stifle the ability of, you know, a business or advertising?
Look, number one, the European law is much stronger. Okay, so anybody who says that this is equal to the European law is way, way overstating the case. Consumers have rights here, okay? And we're talking about the companies that have to comply. They're only large companies, right? So they have to have $25 million in revenue and have information on something like 50,000 people, okay? So these are companies that collect data and keep data for a living. And they have to have some responsibility. I'm not really concerned that a company like Facebook or Google or Twitter would be able to comply with this and still stay in business. They have pretty healthy profit margins.
Okay. Well, what do you also make of, I mean, what we're told is that this law will make it so that it will apply to the rest of the country. Is that the way that the California law was written, so that such that because because companies would have to comply in the state of California, that it would effectively be a nationwide legislation?
Absolutely. So, you know, companies complain about a patchwork of laws. This is a big thing. Well, we can't comply with 50 different state laws. It's too difficult. As I said before, every single state has different laws anyway, and they have to comply with them anyway, so I'm not sure what the big whoop is. However, to the extent that California is the most comprehensive and strongest standard in the country, it does become the national standard. And I'm okay with that. Again, if Congress wants to step in and pass a law that's equally strong or maybe even stronger, and as I said before, I do think that this law could be stronger, that's their prerogative. They've been working on it for months and months and months. I hope there's a federal law passed, but right now, yes, California becomes a national standard.
Not likely. Well, we also know presidential candidate Andrew Yang, he's released an interesting plan saying that data is a property right, or at least a proposal that all Americans have the personal right to their data. Now, what do you think about this plan, Gigi?
Well, I think the idea is that people would get paid for their data. I see several problems with this. As it is, too much information in our society is proprietized, so it is copyrighted or patented or what have you. And I think if you add plain old data to the mix, I mean, it just becomes a huge mess, and you're just going to see lawsuits back and forth. I also think that nobody is ever going to get compensated for what their data is worth. What is it worth? What is my personal information worth to my broadband company or to Google or Facebook? Who's actually going to put a dollar sign on it? I think it's impractical, and I also think it will only lead to more litigation and more claims of, this is mine, I must guard it jealously. Look, the Supreme Court has said you can't copyright the information in the phone book because that's information that everybody should have. But I think that's the logical next step of something like this is the information in the phone book ought to be copyrighted, and let's start have lawsuits and litigation. Yeah. So that's not a conservative principle.
And if you start banning or making it much more difficult for companies to kind of harvest your data without paying consumers for it or anything else, it seems like then they have to try to find out other ways to understand their market, which would maybe mean going direct, hiring surveyors or going directly to consumers and maybe just paying them directly to take surveys. I've even heard CEOs talk about this, that maybe it's actually just cheaper to just physically pay someone. Here's $20, please take a survey and tell us what you like.
Why not? I don't see any problem with that, And again, nobody's saying they can't collect the data. They're saying you have to give consumers a choice, right? You have to give them the ability to access their data, to delete what they don't want. There have been some proposals that consumers should be able to edit any mistakes. That's not in the California law. So it's about giving consumers control. It's not saying to the companies, under no circumstances can you have this data. And obviously, if you need the data to provide a service, nobody's going to take that away from you. It's can you sell it to others? Can you otherwise exploit it in a way that consumers might not want?
Gigi, thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate it. Next on Rising, the Me Too movement. It launched a social sea change, and that's still making waves today.
But how did it start?
Two New York Times journalists, I got it right, in their new book, how they broke the Harvey Weinstein story. Our conversation with them next.